Alright, hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So today I wanted to talk about some PS1 games that may be sitting in your collection right now that maybe you don't realize that they've gone up in price quite a bit. And I'm not just talking about games that are really rare and worth hundreds of dollars. I'm talking about games that are, some of them fairly common, that used to be maybe $20, $30, and now maybe they're 50, 60, 70 or more. There's quite a few of these types of games, and I wanted to just take a few and point them out for you because let's be honest, a lot of you guys are really busy. You don't have time to be sitting there keeping track of what games in your collection are worth what. And if you ever go to sell them online or at a local store or however, or if you just want to know what your collection is worth, I think some of these games might surprise some of you. So some of them are going to be a little more obvious than others, but I think I'm going to hit on a few sort of hidden valuable games that you may not realize are sitting in your collection right now. So let's start with the game that actually originally inspired me to make this video, because this is one that always comes up when I do my eBay game hunting streams. One that surprises a lot of people. They're like, whoa, hold on, Crash Bandicoot is worth that much? Yeah, Crash Bandicoot, the days of this game being a $20, $30 game are kind of over, as you can see here. And I'm showing you guys for all these games the most recent sales. So these are all sold and they're sorted by most recently. And I am putting on some filters, as you can see here, to make sure that we're mostly just getting the game that I want to show. But Crash Bandicoot, as you can see, if you have the black label, non-greatest hits version, is selling with shipping for nearly $100 in some cases, $80. Some of them still slip under the radar, and I'm going to go as to why that is, like why some of them still go a little bit cheaper. We got, with shipping, I include shipping on the price of these for what people are paying for, $80, $63. I think there was even one on here, yeah, $130, 100, 130. So you're probably like, but why is there such a big discrepancy? Why are there still ones selling for 60 and 130? This is a question that comes up sometimes for me. And I think the reason for this is the more common a game is and the more nostalgic that game is for people. A game like Final Fantasy VII is another good example, Black Label, where there's tons of these copies, right? Crash Bandicoot is not a rare game, but this game targets casual gamers. So the people that grew up with a PlayStation, maybe haven't played video games since the PS1 or the PS2, and maybe they get a PS1 or a PS2 as a gift, or they're just looking to get back into playing some games from their childhood. The first game that comes to mind for them are their childhood games, and they just kind of pay whatever. Not everybody is super involved in the prices of games like we are, so they'll just go online, and if they see that all the asking prices from like highly rated sellers on eBay are $100, 130, they're going to pay it. They're not going to really do the research to find out what the game is worth. They're not going to go on like price charting. They're not going to look at recently sold listings. They're just going to be like, oh, this person has 100,000 feedback and it's 99.9% positive. Sure, I'll pay $130. I'll trust them. It's got to be in good condition. That's probably the going rate. So that's why you see this discrepancy between games that can sometimes be really high in price. And then if you scroll down, look at this, half the price, $65. This one here, $55. That's my theory on it, because these games are bought by people that are not really in our retro gamer collector mentality that we all are. So sometimes you get the people that come in and they don't care what the price is as long as it looks legitimate and they trust the seller, they're going to buy it. Okay, the next one here is Parappa the Rapper, but there's something about this one that I want to bring your attention to because I don't think everybody's aware of this. Now, Parappa has always been a somewhat expensive game. It was always sort of in the $70, $80 range for the longest time. It has gone up, but you want to go check your collections right now, because if you're not aware, notice something in these titles. They're all saying no poster, no poster, but watch what happens, no poster, when it finally has the poster. It almost doubles the price. So this PS1 Parappa game does have a poster that is a fold-out poster, as you can see right here, and that is pretty rare, pretty valuable. People really look for it. This one here also has the poster, $225. So you're adding about at least $100 to the price of Parappa. Here's the poster right here. Pretty cool poster. But yeah, if your Parappa game has this poster, congrats, you're sitting on a $100 poster as the insert. Great game. Just make sure you're playing it on a CRT TV. Playing this game in an HD setup with even just the slightest little bit of lag makes it almost impossible. Here's another one that's going to come as a shock to a lot of you, because this is a game that was $20 to $30 for the longest time. One of my personal favorite PS1 games, and that is Heart of Darkness. Now, here's a copy here for $40, but if you're noticing, if your copy of Heart of Darkness has the 3D glasses, it is basically a almost $100 game in many instances. So Heart of Darkness, if I can find a photo here, has a set of 3D glasses, as you can see right here. And that was mainly made just to be used for the opening cutscene. You can kind of view it in 3D as a cool little like bonus extra. And for the longest time, copies of this game, even with the 3D glasses, while fairly hard to find, were still around the normal price. People finally realized that finding a copy with the original glasses, especially if they're intact and untorn from the original piece of cardboard that came with the game, adds quite a bit of value. Is it worth tracking down unless you're, a hardcore collector of all things PS1? Absolutely not. The 3D glasses are not going to add much to the gameplay for you at all because it's just for that opening cutscene. As you can see here, a nice complete copy, $155 or $145. Pretty crazy, right? So skip the glasses, play the game. It's awesome. But even without the glasses, this game has pretty much doubled in, the years where it used to go for $15, $20 all day, every day. Here's another one, Twisted Metal. You're like, oh, but Pete, this one's only $35, $40. No, those are for the greatest hits versions. If you happen to have this variant of Twisted Metal, which many of you may have because it's uncommon, but it's not exceedingly rare, the Black Label Jewel Case version of Twisted Metal is about $150. It used to be about $200. The price has kind of stabilized a little bit and come down. There also is the long box version, which is a lot more common than the Jewel Case. But if you happen to have the rare Black Label Jewel Case variant, which as you can see is a bit uncommon, I'm having to scroll here quite a bit to even find one. Someone got really lucky and got one for $18. But I will tell you, as you can see here, that is not the price of it. Here's another one for $230. So price is kind of all over the place. And if you're keen to sniping on eBay, as you can see, if you're really patient, you can definitely, and quick with the trigger finger, you can definitely get jewel case copies of this game for way under market price, and add a nice little jewel case variant relic to your collection. Wow, they are, I mean, that's just the case without the disc, but yeah, some people are getting some fantastic deals here on the jewel case. All right, next is a game that some of you might have in your collection right now and have absolutely no idea that this is a $100 game, and that is Colin McRae Rally 2.0. This game used to be about $30 to $40, $35, $40. When I picked up my copy, I think I paid about $20. I got a really great deal. But it is a pretty rare PS1 game, and it is notable in the racing game fans community because it is developed by Codemasters, and we all know that Codemasters makes some excellent racing games. And as you can see, people respect this game. They're even buying water damaged, sun faded copies for $80 shipped. So the original one is really fairly common. As you can see, it usually goes for $20, so it's really easy to overlook this one in your collection as a $100 rally racing game that you have no idea was that expensive. Metal Gear Solid. I wanted to include this one in here because this is one that people really like. It's a very common game, and for the longest time, people knew this as like a $20, $25 game and really never exceeded that price, even for Black Label copies. But as time goes on, Metal Gear Solid is one of those games just like Crash Bandicoot where you get the people that are really casually into nostalgic PS1 games from their childhood. They're going to pay whatever seems to be the asking price, not so much the value of it. So that is why you will have discrepancies, even though this one has no manual. But you'll still see copies of this going for like $30, $35, but then you'll see copies going for $60 and in some cases more. So Metal Gear Solid, just wanted to bring it to your attention, right? Like I said, this video is not necessarily about games that are super rare worth hundreds. It's more about the games that used to be worth 20 but are now like 50 or 60. So this is also the kind of game where if you've been collecting over the years and used to buy lots, you may have multiple copies of this game. And if you're sitting on 1 or 2 extra copies of Metal Gear Solid, congrats, you've got like an extra $100 sitting there waiting for you to use as trade bait or sell at a convention or eBay or a local game store, whatever have you. All right, so Dino Crisis. While not necessarily wanting to focus on the Black Label version here, I just wanted to show you how rare the Greatest Hits version is, and if you happen to have it, you've kind of hit the lottery. The Black Label version of Dino Crisis is still, around the price it has been for quite a bit, $50, $60, nothing crazy. But in the sold listings here, there's no Greatest Hits, and there's a reason for that. I have to show you the only spoiler for the next game, the only copies that are available are unsold, but it is generally asked as a several $100 game if you have the Greatest Hits version. There are, a lot of Greatest Hits PS1 games that people are very aware of being rare and expensive. NFL Blitz, you got Toy Story 2, of course, but Dino Crisis has been on the up and up over the years, is becoming one of the most rare and expensive Greatest Hits versions out there. And I know a lot of you are not really into Greatest Hits, so if you just happen to have a Greatest Hits copy of Dino Crisis, once again, you've got a really expensive game that maybe you were unaware of. Okay, so the next one is Namco Museum. Now, not this one in particular, but I just wanted to show you like how cheap these Namco Museum games typically are, right? Like look at this, $9, $10. We kind of always associated these Namco Museums with being cheap. Even, these ones here, not too bad, $15. But if you happen to have these specific versions here, Namco Museum Volume 5 and Namco Museum Volume 4, which I'll show you a little bit better here, These are really rare versions, late release versions of this museum, which was kind of cool. If you look here, they had covers that would spell out Namco. If you have the full collection, it generally goes for several $100s, but Volume 4 and Volume 5 are the ones that are worth a lot, especially Volume 5, as you can see, is typically about $150, $160. And these are the kind of games that could be sitting in your collection. You got them in a bargain bin back in the day for a few dollars, and you have no idea that you're sitting on a really rare, expensive PS1 game. Here's another one in the same vein, while not quite as ridiculously priced and uncommon as those ones. This is a fairly hard to find game that is the type of game that you would have bought for $5 or maybe $10, and you have no idea that it's now somewhat desirable, and that's Konami Arcade Classics, which is about $40 to $50. It's a little hard to find. Actually, I think right now there's only 21 results. There's not too many available. There's actually some fairly priced ones available on here with eBay. But yeah, as you can see, a lot of people are expecting in that $40 to $50 price range. Not a ton for sale, but once again, one of those games that you're potentially sitting on without even realizing it. Also, Alien Resurrection, a game that has a really interesting history. Used to be a $30, $40 game at the most for the longest time. And then about a year ago, I think it was discovered that this is actually a game that you can use as a boot up disc to run burnt games, like burnt boot up games on your PlayStation 1. There's like some kind of hidden menu in here or something that you can use to play burnt games, and that drove the price up really, really expensive. I think this became like a $200 game or something crazy. It was very expensive. The price has come back down as I anticipated, but has never fully recovered to its once cheaper prices. So it's really easy to overlook having Alien Resurrection in your collection if you're unaware of what happened to this game last year that drove the price up in some instances to nearing $100 currently. Let's talk about some RPGs, because there are several RPGs on PS1 that used to be thought of as super common, really cheap. I'm sure you all remember the days where Dragon Warrior 7 was considered like, I don't want to say a filler game or bargain bin, it's anything but that, but it was like a $20 to $30 max PS1 RPG, which we always thought was really odd, right? Because it was like, wow, this is Dragon, sorry, I'm in the Dragon Quest mindset, Dragon Warrior 7. But now it is, as you can see, in some instances over $100. So this is one that's really easy to overlook if you're still in that mindset from years ago, where this was still one of the cheapest PS1 games, cheapest PS1 RPGs, and one of the most common PS1 RPGs. As you can see, that doesn't matter anymore. This also isn't entirely having to do with the hype of the remake that's coming out. This was happening long before that was even a known project. Legend of Dragoon is another one, a game that, once again, most people remember this being a very cheap, very common $20 to $30 game for the PS1. There was a point where this game was actually well over $100 for a brief period. There must have been something going on hyping up Legend of Dragoon, but it has come back down a bit, but it is still like double or triple the price easily of what this used to be worth not that long ago. Upwards of $75. Depends on the condition, obviously. Some of you may have multiple copies of this in your collection easily. This was the type of game that would come in PS1 lots all the time, and you would really think not much of it. Now, of course, these prices are just for the Black Label version, not the greatest hits, and as you can also see, there are still copies that go for $30, $40, but there are many that go for $60 and $70. And speaking of another game in a similar situation, just as common, around similar prices, that is Wild Arms 1. This was one of my first PS1 games that I got with my console, and it was dirt cheap for the longest time. We're talking, Wild Arms was like a $10 game for a very long time. Finally getting its dues, a bit more attention, the series, I guess because people are just so desperate for wanting more Wild Arms games that are just really not coming. So, more so the first one. The second one was always a little bit more expensive than the first game, but we're kind of just focused on the first Wild Arms here, which, as you can see, can near $70 in some instances. So, not the cheap little common game that it once was anymore. And I have good news for those of you that are into a certain PS1 RPG that used to always be $5, Shadow Madness. It's still worth $5. Sorry to break it to you. Poor old Shadow Madness. It didn't really get the break that other cheaper common PS1 RPGs did. As you can see, $5, $13, $25. $25 is a pretty good record. Apparently, though, if you have this cloth map and the strategy guide, it's worth more than double of what the entire game is worth in some instances. So the cloth map, kind of rare to get a hold of. But yeah, poor Shadow Madness, while it used to be like a $10 game, hey, at least it's a $20 game now, so that's a 100% price increase. Also, Beyond the Beyond, one of those PS1 RPGs that, once again, Used to be very, very common, very cheap. People couldn't even get rid of this game. It had a bad reputation. I think that reputation has sort of recovered over time. Personally, I don't hate the game. I actually kind of enjoy it for what it is. Beyond Beyond, upwards of $60. So once again, a little inconspicuous PS1 RPG that you may be sitting on and unaware of the value. Here is a little bargain bin game that is pretty rare. So this is not the type of game that I would expect a lot of you to have in your collection. But if you do, it looks like the type of game that is like $5. And back in the day, it was, because that's what I paid for my copy. About Rascal Racers, PS1. Asking price for this is about as cheap as $60, $50, but a lot of people want way more than that because it is rare. I will warn you though, this is a terrible game. This is a really bad budget kart racer, and as you see, if you click sold, the only copy that has sold is a disc-only copy, and someone got one for $35 because, oh, sorry, not even with the disc. That's just the case in the manual for $30. So while it doesn't sell often because, let's be honest, it's not a very good game, it is one where if you have it in your collection, it's worth a pretty penny. Next is Tekken, but I wanted to highlight a specific version of Tekken that a lot of you may be unaware that you're sitting on a pretty expensive PS1 game. The long box version, pretty standard, $50, $60, nothing crazy. But if you have the black label jewel case variant of Tekken, it is about a $200 game, as you can see. So if you have the greatest hits, your typical $30 price around. Long box version, not too far off from that. But I'm trying to see if there's another example on here. Here's one for 100, here's one for 80, one for 65. So as you can see, the price, a lot of these games, the thing you got to remember with these games that have all these different variant versions, a lot of people are unaware of the variants being worth a lot more and being a lot more rare. So a lot of times when they go to check the price, unless they're like a really well-known gaming store that knows to do their research, they will price these copies according to the long box version, or even as cheap as like the greatest hits if they're unaware of how rare the version of the game is that they're sitting on. So just wanted to bring it to your attention, but let's just say that it's in the realm of $100 to $200 typically for the black label jewel case variant. Here's another one. Used to be a bargain bin trash game in many people's eyes, but Fantastic Four. This is not a byproduct of the movie surrounding, the recent Fantastic Four movie. These prices were happening before the movie. In fact, the game, I feel, was almost more expensive before the movie came out, and then after the movie came out, the prices came down a little bit, I feel at least. But Fantastic Four used to be a really cheap game that no one cared about because it was supposed to be one of the worst games on PlayStation 1. But it's the kind of game where a lot of you may own it, especially if you're a Marvel or a comic or a superhero fan. So I just wanted to bring that one to your attention. Here's another one that typically we don't usually align movie license games with being somewhat pricey, but The Mummy is a $50 game in many instances. This is the type of game that most people probably have in their collection. Maybe you even bought it while it was new when you were big fans of The Mummy when you were younger. I personally still have not played this game, so I can't tell you if it's like worth the price or anything like that. But yeah, it's just one of those movie license games. There's a lot of them on the PS1. Like Blade is another one that's like $70. There's quite a few of them, but yeah, just a little bit more expensive than you were probably anticipating. Okay, Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. I hate to break it to you. Forbidden Memories not exactly more expensive than you would think. It still is in that $20 to $25 price range, but there is a variant here that some of you may be unaware of, and that is the limited edition version, which has a foil cover, which, as you can see, increases the price by a tiny bit if it doesn't have the cards. Some people just really like that foil cover. In many instances, it doesn't really make a difference, but a lot of times it will make a bit of a difference. But if you have it with the cards, let me see if I can sort this by highest first. I'm not sure if any have sold recently with the cards. I think that one there had one card. Yeah, so here's one that's sealed. Obviously, you guys are not going to have a sealed version, but look at this one. $1,100 because it comes with the original cards that came with the limited edition, which is why I wanted to bring this up to you guys. Even if you're just sitting on one or two of the cards, like this one seems to be, it says it has one promo card, seemingly. It increases the value of this substantially. So if you're the type of person that bought the limited edition, never got rid of the cards, maybe they're in a binder, doesn't matter the condition, break those things out because, man, you're sitting on one of the most valuable versions of a PS1 game. Okay, and lastly here, I just wanted to talk about a bit of a underloved, in my opinion, fighting game. I played it on the N64. I was a big fan of War Gods growing up. But once again, it's one of those kind of games where you might associate your old memories of this being a pretty cheap game, a hated on fighting game that no one cares about. It may surprise you that people are paying $50, in some cases even more. Apparently, that's all that's sold recently for War Gods, so all 3 fans of the game have bought copies. But as you can see, there's still people here asking anywhere between $40 and $90. So War God's probably a little bit more expensive than you may have been anticipating. Anyway, guys, there's a lot more PS1 games that I could have talked about in this video, but hopefully I pointed out at least something in your collection that maybe you were unaware of. Remember to leave a like if you found this video helpful, and maybe I'll put out another one for you guys sometime, whether it's for the PS1 or maybe another console. Let me know. What games did I not talk about in this video that maybe are more expensive than a lot of people are thinking? Leave a comment. Let me know. Thank you guys for watching.